all. Greetings. This is Jonathan here. I'm so happy to be
Cheers.
with all
Cheers.
these great writers. I was very glad when Melanie stumbled on Swierczynski because we're busy stumbling on Santlofer, you know? So a few weeks ago, I was having Zoom cocktails with these two wonderful writers, Alison, Gaylin, and Megan Abbott, and we were talking about favorite books we're reading during this horrible time, movies we love, movies we're watching, TV shows we're watching, podcasts we're listening to. And we thought we would reprise that a little bit, maybe a slightly more formal way of doing it, although I can tell already it's not going to be all that formal. So we added to Megan Abbott and Alison Gaylin, two amazing writers, Duane Swierczynski and Lauren Wilkinson, who I'm so proud to have along here. So we're going to start by going around and talking about a book we love, a crime novel that we love, or that we've been reading during this time for one reason or another during the quarantine, why it means something to us, and pass that on to you. And then hopefully go on to a movie and possibly other forms of at-home entertainment if we get there. At the end, ask your questions, but I'm going to start by asking Alison Gaylin to talk about a book that interests her and that she's been reading now.
Well, it's interesting because the book that I'm working on right now, which deals a lot with this very intimate act of killing for someone that you don't know at all, I've been rereading Strangers on a Train, which is a terrific book, and which I've always thought, but right now I found that it's been a great pandemic read for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's very angry. There's a lot of there's a lot of emotion in it, but it's told very, very sparingly, and it's also a quick read. So if you're like me and your attention span is kind of pinging out in a whole bunch of different directions, you can pick up this very brief, very powerful book and just get absorbed in the scene. One thing I've always loved about Strangers on a Train is the way the dialogue and sort of description work together to tell us who every character is, particularly Guy and Bruno, the two main characters. So there's a scene between Guy and the poor doomed Marion, and the way he describes, it's all dialogue, but the way he describes the way she's talking tells us everything about how he feels about her and all the roiling anger that he feels. So I always, I've taught at Center for Fiction before, I've worked for Jonathan, and I've always showed my students that specific scene because I think dialogue should and description should tell us more about character than about plot, and I feel that, you know, in this book it just does a wonderful job of both. So it's kind of fast and furious. It's a great pandemic read. It's violent. It's angry. It has very unlikable characters in it, and I just love it.
Can I say two couple of quick things? One, is that going to be a new blurb, a great pandemic read?
I hope not. I hope.
The thing is, you didn't mention
long enough for
Patricia Highsmith. The author is Patricia Highsmith. It's her first novel. She wrote it when she was 25, published it when she was like 28 or 29. It became a Hitchcock movie, which is quite different than the book. Also good, but the book is fantastic.
Yes. Yes, I saw the movie before I read the book, and I loved the movie, and then I read the book, and I was like, wow, I didn't even know these people, you know.
Made the bad guy attractive, as opposed to in the book, he's so odious and disgusting.
Yeah.
You know. But it's a great, as you said, it's just one of the greatest reads out there. You know, it's beautifully written, and I'll bet people have things they know about Patricia Highsmith they'd like to add, that lovely character in history. No?
Well, I remember at NoirCon, we had a speaker, Joan Shankar, one of Highsmith's biographers, who brought a pair of Patricia Highsmith's jeans, which I thought was cool, but also super creepy. It was like, you know, you're there for that, Megan? You guys were there, right? For that, it was like.
Yeah, and I'll add a creepy Highsmith detail is that she collected snails and used to transport them through airports and early TSA by having them in her bra.
That's amazing because she wrote that incredibly scary, weird short story about the snails, and so she.
Oh yeah.
Obsession, snails.
Yeah.
Well, she wrote that novel at the arts colony Yaddo, which, is a great place for writers and artists and composers. And she, she's one of the legendary Yaddo people because she wrote it there. She never went back, but she left her estate to Yaddo because it was so meaningful to her. So when people talk trash about Patricia Highsmith, I always defend her. So,
was an anti-Semite, so there's that.
Yeah, she had a lot of unlikable qualities. I mean, biography, but the book is great. Strangers on a Train is so
and I'm
great.
Jewish, and I love her writing. So there you go. That's the revenge of time.
If we start eliminating all the writers and artists who are hideous people, we're not going to have anything left.
But we'd all still be here.
Yeah, of course.
Less competition.
How do you guys feel about Tom Ripley?
I think he's one of the great amoral characters in literature. But Alison, why don't you talk, or Megan?
Well, I mean, I kind of feel the same way about him as I do about Bruno, where he's just fascinating to me because, and this is where, people telling you that you should only write likable characters, you can hold, characters like Tom Ripley up for them because they're fascinating and compelling, and it doesn't matter whether they have a soft core. You don't want them to. I find that character terrifying in a really wonderful way.
I'm curious, Lauren, why did you ask that?
Oh, because I mean, that's who I think of when I think of Patricia Highsmith. And, I always, I know that, the author is dead, but I always wonder how much of her is in him, I guess.
I have a quick question about that in relation to Strangers on a Train for Alison. So there's the ending of Strangers on a Train. It's not going to spoil anything, but there's a kind of more moralistic ending to that book. And I always wondered, I can't find out, I don't think, do you think it was tacked on that the publisher made her do that?
It's interesting because it is moralistic. It is a satisfying ending. I think I don't know because I haven't read, I don't profess to be, a scholar of her, but it does feel a little bit like that might have, having had this done to me myself by various editors, not my current editor, but previous editors along the line in the past, I could see somebody saying, no, there, he's got to pay, he's got to, I don't want to give away.
No, I know.
Yeah, but
about Ripley, just back to Lauren's question, I wrestle with him so much. I know Highsmith talks a lot about identifying with him, and that I think she even said that Ripley is me, and I find that fascinating. And I was struck rereading Talented Mr. Ripley. In many ways, all the books, he's sort of different in them, but in that one, I was struck by how sympathetic he is in the first one, because he's the working class guy around I identified with him so much. All my class rage came bubbling forth. And I think it's very good with Highsmith because his first incident is, he does not mean to do anything. And it does kind of just happen. And I think it's very clever because it draws on those impulses that anyone who's ever felt like an underdog or felt sort of class anxiety. I think you're drawn to him for that reason.
Yeah, I agree. I was about to add that anytime I tell Megan that one of the characters in her book I can't stand, she says, I love that character. That's my character, right?
Yep, yeah.
But I'm going to pass this over to Lauren. Lauren, can you talk about your book, please?
Oh, yeah. So I chose Your House Will Pay by Steph Cha. and I loved it. Why did I choose it? Why did I think it would be good pandemic reading? Probably because I suspected that it would be very absorbing, and anything to get out of the nightmare of existence. And I have been sucked into an incredible, vibrant world. Told my mom about it today, and she started, she texted me and say, she's like, this is really funny. She's been really enjoying it. And it is funny, but it's also really sad, you know, and it's just, it's been a real pleasure for me to, just backtracking a little bit. I don't know about all of you, but sometimes it's hard to read for pleasure for me, because I do so much reading, for that it's work. It's work in a lot of ways. You read the blurb, you're just reading all this stuff, but this book is the first book in a while where I've just been able to enjoy it. Like, I haven't enjoyed a book in a really long time, because it feels like, you know, it feels like taking care of myself. It feels like leisure. And
so it's
been super refreshing.
read this book now specifically. You read it during this time.
Yes. And it's been especially, you know, to access that. It might even be that I'm only able to access these feelings of like reading for pleasure because I kind of feel a little bit like I'm in dry dock. I mean, I'm working, but time has no meaning anymore. So, you know, it's like things have changed so much for me that, I feel like maybe if I had read this book 6 months ago, I wouldn't be responding to it the way that I am. I wouldn't be as absorbed. My mind might be on some other thing, or looking at it, deconstructing it, seeing, what can I steal, you know, for my next thing. But now I'm just enjoying it on the phone, and that's an interesting
thing, Lauren, that maybe we are reading a little differently because we have this weird time and we're disconnected from so many things, you know, that right?
Yeah, it's almost, I mean, I don't really want to put a silver lining on this time because, but it does remind me of being like, reading this book reminds me of how I used to read when I was a kid. When I was, you know, I have a sister now, but I grew up an only child, and I was the type of kid who could read, you know, keep themselves entertained for hours. And I, you know, would camp out in our tent in the backyard with like a pile of books and just spend the whole day reading. And, you know, that attention span I haven't had in a long time, and just an actual just enjoyment and absorption I haven't really had in a long time. So
I can relate to that. I'm an only child too, and I miss that feeling, you know, that
Actually, another pandemic thing that I did that's book related is I wrote to an author who wrote a book that I read when I was 13.
Wow.
And I was like, you know, I have the time now. That's the kind of thing where I was like, you know, it's the kind of thing where in my regular life I would be like, I'll do that some other time. But I just, because the books that I read at that age meant so much to me. And I just wanted him to know that it was a super formative book for me. And
that's so great. Yeah, what was the book?
It was The Saskia by Brian Hall. And he wrote back. I feel like a kid. He wrote back, and he said that he's actually, the character he's writing a new book with the same character, and the character now is a little bit older than me now, and the character when I read the book was my age. So, you know, I'm actually really excited about this.
Writing the books for you, clearly.
Apparently so. Like, thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Duane.
Actually, on that note, when I was 16, actually, I wrote to one of my writing heroes, Clive Barker, you know, the Hellraiser and Books of Blood guy, and he wrote back, and I remember, you know, getting his typewritten letter. I'm sure that an assistant typed it out, but it was full of enough answers to my letter that I was like, wow, this is long before social media or anything else. It was like, this is 1987 or something. So that gave me such a boost. So, you know, a young writer was, oh my God, he knows I exist. Maybe I can write. It was just such a great thing. So I'm so happy you did that, Lauren. you're an accomplished author now, but I mean, any writer, we all like hearing from people who, you know, have read our stuff and has had an impact. That's wonderful. So, you know, that's a great impulse. And I think writing to our favorite writers and even to our teachers, I kind of feel like we don't give our teachers enough due. And like, I kind of want to give a few notes to, you know, really influential teachers who didn't send me to the, you know, therapist when they probably should have, but who were yet inspirational, you know.
While we have you on screen, Duane, could you go right into your book?
Oh, sure. A lot of my picks revolve around a very similar topic. I'm here in LA, and I love LA. I love driving through LA and seeing it. I'm still very much a fan of it, yet I can't see it now. I'm cut off from it. So my picks are sort of like how to cheat that and get out there. So my book is a new one. It's by Scott Phillips, who you may know from Ice Harvest and many fine works. It's his new one called That Left Turn at Albuquerque, which I'm pretty sure is a Bugs Bunny reference that kind of sets up the mood of the book. It's very much like a crazy, you know, hairpin, you know, it's very Elmore Leonard, very Better Call Saul, about a sleazy lawyer who tries to pull a scam and fails miserably, and, you know, and then he tries an even more audacious scam. And to me, it was like the perfect, you know, gets me out of my own head, gets me into LA again, and lets me have fun with these crazy characters. Not one of them likable. They're all just glorious scumbags. And that's what I love. I love that about books, you know. And I mean, like Tom Ripley to Walter White to whoever else. I mean, to Douglas Kirby in this book, he's just great. You know, he's making mistakes left and right. He allies himself with the wrong people. And there are just enough, you know, fun throwaway comments about LA, like everyone likes to tell you about how they go in traffic. Doesn't matter what the GPS says. Like, he makes the point. It's like, no, I know a better way. Go through here. It's like, oh, everyone has their LA, you know. To me, it was a great escape. I had actually pre-ordered it, and I saved it when things kind of hit the fan. I knew I'd want to uplift at some point. So I read it in like late March, and it was like, yeah, this is what I needed pretty much. But I'm also, I think I sneak one more reference in, actually one more book in. A book that I read that actually feels very timely is sort of like more of a science fiction book by John Brunner called The Sheep Look Up. Now, this is written 50 years ago about how the world's kind of falling out of, you know, sort of into chaos. And I'm telling you, the most shocking thing was how much it felt like today, like to the point where there's a character called Prexy, who's the president, who pops up to spout inanities, and like, it just feels like 2020. I was stunned that I'm actually reading a book that was written in 1970 or something. That's a little more depressing. I'm not sure I recommend it, but I feel like it's like, I was absorbed by it. It felt very much like, that's my pandemic read. I'll always remember this time as like, oh yeah, the sheep look up, that's us, you know, and it's pretty wonderful. So I go back and forth between escapist stuff into things that'll really depress me, you know, because that's how I torture myself.
That's good. That's good to know. Megan, can you talk to us about the books?
Yes. I picked as my pandemic read, which is really a whole series, but I picked it because it is a whole series and we do have time on our hands, and because the 10th book in the series comes out in July, which is Ace Atkins' Quinn Coulson series, which starts with the Ranger, and they're all connected, but you actually could just jump, you know, grab any one of them. And the sort of putative center of the books is Quinn Coulson, who was this vet returning from Iraq who goes back to his hometown in Mississippi and becomes sheriff of a really sort of corrupt county in Mississippi. And what I love about it is that this whole tapestry of characters emerges as the books go on. And there's just fascinating people that you come to love, and many that are very bad people, and many that are good, kind of bad, kind of good, and many, you know, there's just, I consider them a very humane point of view, even though a lot of dark stuff happens, and they're very populist. They're very, the spirit is sound and good, and they're often very funny, but they're a way of looking at the South as it is now. It's haunted by its past, but reckoning with all kinds of new problems. It's about race and class and poverty and meth and of course and loss and family. And I just think they're just wonderful. And they're, you know, to know that you could pick up one and then have 9 others to sort of work your way through feels like such a gift in this moment, for just the way Lauren is saying, because it's a time when you can possibly, unless you're an essential worker, and God bless you all, have maybe more time than you normally would, that this can be a solve. And while everyone's talking about contacting their idols, I had experience too. So I was reading this piece that Richard Price, one of my writing heroes, had written about Richard Yates, one of my writing heroes.
The double.
Richard Price on the Deuce, so I knew him. So I sent him an email and how are you doing? And I can't believe that he was Richard Yates's writing student in the 70s in New York, and he shared via email these reminiscences, and I actually burst into tears reading the email. It was so beautiful. Wow. And there was something so lovely about the passage of feeling about books and story and the meaning other writers can have for us. So I wouldn't maybe never have done that were it not for, so going back, I won't say silver lining, but yeah. We're all feeling things, where maybe we're more introspective, we're feeling things more intensely, certainly.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book in the series and in Ace's series that you would say like really stands out?
I love them all for different reasons. I mean, they do move around. Like sometimes Quinn's at the center and sometimes he's not. I tend to favor the ones where Lily, who's, in some ways, but I think Ace will freely say that she's the far better investigator. And I tend to like ones where she's sort of at the center, and some of them are more comedic than others. But I don't think you could go wrong with any of them. But if you're going to pick, I'd say go with the first one because it's a great entree into that world.
I was going to say all of the books that people are choosing are so amazing that, Ace Atkins, I love, and Richard Price is I've read every Richard Price book. Sometimes I read them and I want to, as Lauren said, I want to steal everything. And I have actually stolen a few Richard Price ideas. Well, okay, moving on. I did, Lauren, though. I spent a lot of time on the roof of my building because there's a roof garden, and thank God. And done something I never do. Like I take a book and I'll spend the whole afternoon reading a book when I do have other stuff I should be doing, and yet it's so wonderful. And what I did was I took a stack of books up one day, and they were all books I had not read. And then I ended up reading a book I had read, which was Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. And I lay on this rattan thing on the roof in the middle of Manhattan, a beautiful sunny day. I got sunburn on one side of my face. And I read Rosemary's Baby like in the afternoon. And I realized it was the third time I'd read it. And for those of you who don't know about Ira Levin, Ira Levin was not one of those prolific writers. He wrote A Kiss Before Dying was his first novel. And then like 10 years later, he wrote Rosemary's Baby. And then another 10 years passed and he wrote The Stepford Wives. And then more than a few years passed and he wrote The Boys from Brazil. It's just like, excuse me, who are you? And then he also wrote Death Trap for Broadway, which I didn't realize. And then he also, this makes me kind of like hate him because it's so insane. He wrote He Touched Me for Barbara Streisand. Excuse me?
What?
What?
Really?
Right? Excuse me. Yeah, he did. So I don't know. He had either a lot of time where he never slept but Rosemary's Baby, if you've never read it, everybody has seen the movie, which is great, Roman Polanski. The book is simple. It's very similar, I think, to Strangers on a Train. It's very simple. It's in a genre I don't particularly like. I don't like the horror genre, but the whole idea of, normalcy, that, you think you have a perfect life, you have this great apartment in New York. Just, oh, by the way, your neighbor's coven of witches, your hideous, narcissistic, actor husband is just going to happen to maybe sell you to the devil, which it's the whole book feels to me like one big cautionary tale. Like, don't move into a great New York apartment. Don't
Right.
don't marry an actor
Anybody.
or a writer or an artist, because they'll do anything for their career, right?
Definitely not Cassavetes. Avoid Cassavetes. He'll sell you down the river.
Well, John Cassavetes, who plays Guy, another character named Guy, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Anybody named
I
Guy.
think John Cassavetes is the soul of that movie. Even
Oh,
though,
yeah.
in the book, no. In the book, it's all about Rosemary, and she's an amazing, she's the ultimate, like damsel in distress. Nobody believes her. She's the woman no one believes. But in the movie, John Cassavetes just he's fantastic because he's such a good actor, and he has so much veritas that you believe him. Like if I were married, I'd believe him. I'd believe him. And he's just the worst snake in the world. But anyway, I loved the book again. It made me watch the movies on Amazon or Netflix, so you can watch them. And Roman Polanski collaborated with Ira Levin. Like apparently he talked to him all the time, and he would ask him things like, so what color dress do you think Rosemary was wearing that day?
Right.
I mean, it was that intense.
Yeah.
But I heard that actually Polanski didn't know that it was the most faithful adaptation of a novel ever because he didn't know he can change anything. So he actually made sure he matched everything, like what was on the cover of Time magazine at the time of this story. It's like, that's crazy level of detail that every writer wishes for, right? He wishes the director would go, you're God, what should we do now? That's kind of most faithful. I mean, I think it said that if you watch the movie, you've already read the book and vice versa because it's so close. But interesting you're saying, Jonathan, about Cassavetes' performance. The performances lend something else to it, though, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that.
Got
Oh,
it.
no.
Book. Sorry. That
No.
one difference I think between them is the book is more on Rosemary's side, and it really is about being a victimized woman in particular, and in an era when that really no one was interested in telling stories, or no men were interested in telling stories like that. And the scene that's so much more upsetting in the book is the rape scene, and that it's scary in the movie, but it's not like the book. And to me, that's a really great writer. His ability to convey female powerlessness in the face of an assault was quite.
It's interesting, Megan, because you had said that to me. And so when I was reading the book, I was very aware of that rape scene. And Polanski takes it almost exactly but somehow in the book, I think there's an aftermath to that scene when you're in Rosemary's head. And that's what makes it terrifying, So, Lauren, were you about to say something? I saw you on the screen.
Yeah, I was just, because I know a lot of you seem like you're in LA a lot and doing a lot of screenwriting stuff. And I was when I was out there doing that, I got in a Lyft because I can't drive, which does not make me very well adapted to LA. And the driver was talking to me and he asked me what I did, and I said I was a writer, and he said, "Oh, my uncle was a writer, Ira Levin. Have you ever heard of him?" He was like, "Yeah, I have."
Wow.
I'm like, no,
Wow.
like, yes. And I was like trying to use them for information, and I was like, wow, this is it just felt so specific, I felt like I'm like completely thrilled by this person, but he
so
was
cool.
Like, I don't know, it was really
wow.
It was really a fun moment.
That's amazing.
Well,
It's crazy town.
I know.
The other thing in the Ira Levin in the book, which is also in the movie, although in the book there are 3 dream sequences, and I always think like dream nightmare sequences in books are awful. Like usually really corny. You can't. Just why is everyone writing one now? Everyone's laughing, or is everyone on their third?
Megan has a lot of dream sequences in her books, and I do too. But anyway, go on now.
I write them all the time, and then I take them out because but I think Ira Levin just writes them straight. You're just reading, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm in a dream sequence, and it reminded me of surrealist movies like Buñuel, who does dreams.
Oh yeah.
So amazingly well,
Well,
Yeah,
he does an amazing job with that in the book, and I was going to say, but and in the movie, I mean, I very rarely, you know, seen movies that are able to capture that very hallucinatory feeling of dreams, and definitely Polanski got that in, you know, that whole sort of, when she says this is no dream, this is real. That part's really terrifying. But yes, I mean, it's more sort of like a weird acid trippy feeling in the movie, but in the book, as I remember, I read it a long time ago, but I remember it just being more deeply disturbing in a way, like just a little more real, I guess. I don't know. Although the movie, I was terrified by the movie, and then I read the book, just like Strangers on a Train, and I was even more terrified by the book.
I mean, I think, doesn't it bring up the difference between books and movies anyway, that the part that goes inside your brain and eats part of your brain and your soul is different in a visual image, because completes it for you. As in a book, you're making it up kind of with the writer.
Completely.
Yeah, and the writer's dragging you into these you know, weird, twisted thoughts of theirs, and it's so scary. It's so absorbing, really, you know.
Do we want to shift into movies before this all ends? Megan is nodding wildly, so let's
but before we leave, I just wanted to go back to what Megan said and just really agree with it really strongly, because I think, like, thematically there's so much about women's agency, like, not, you know, in Rosemary's Baby and also Stepford Wives, and it's just like it's a very interesting, you know, preoccupation for him to have. So I agree with you about that book, and it seems.
But isn't it interesting that a writer like Ira Levin, who was writing in the 50s and 60s and then the 70s, would have tapped into that in a way that was so real and interesting, you know?
We're dying too, now that I think about it. Now, I have not read that book in many years, but I have seen the movie fairly recently. But that's also about a woman, well, that's a Ripley-esque, a woman victimized by a Ripley-esque kind of figure. So I think I mean, someone needs to write the Ira Levin biography. That's what we're
Seriously. I think I know a guy we can talk to. We can get him on as a consultant.
Warren has the connection to the Lyft driver uncle, so now you're allowed to write the Ira Levin biography.
Writer's room right here for the show.
Nice.
Megan, you want to hit a movie that's been meaningful to you during this?
Sort of cheating, but I wanted to make a pitch for the entire Criterion stream.
Oh yes.
It's the best streaming deal you can do. It's
$99 a year.
Yes, it's the greatest, but in particular right now has just been, they've just sort of had mercy on us in the pandemic, and they put on there all these great Columbia noirs, you know, Gilda, Lady from Shanghai, In a Lonely Place, and then some more obscure ones that people might not know, like the Murder by Contract, which I'd never seen, which is, I know, one of Scorsese's favorite movies, and it was this, like, it's like 72 minutes or something. It's so unbelievably short. Vince Edwards, it's about a hitman. It's really spectacular, and also
so great. Yeah, I love that. It was fantastic.
I couldn't believe it. It was so tight and lean and really existential, and also very funny. So there, and Human Desire, Pushover, and then they have the Jean Arthur movies, which, if you need something lighter, the more the merrier. It's the greatest and sexiest screwball comedy of all time. Only Angels Have Wings, Jean Arthur and Cary Grant, like you can't beat it. So it's just this, I have just loved, in particular, going back to 1930s movies in the pandemic. I think it's because you want to see people that lived through, you know, were between wars and lived through the Great Depression, and still were able.
You can't take it with you.
Those were the first movies I fell in love with, were 1930s movies, and there's something about that kind of storytelling that there's very dark and very funny and very quick. And like it was almost like they were running out of time, and they were making. I just love it.
That's cool.
Yeah. Anyway, Duane, you're on my screen, so.
Oh.
What's the matter, Megan?
I was just asking Duane, had he seen Murder by Contract before it was on Criterion? Or?
Well, actually, as it came on Criterion last year, they first debuted it. I saw it, and I was binging all those great Colombian noirs. It just kind of blew me away how, like, you're right, how funny it is. Like, not to spoil anything, at one point, our killer is trying to buy this crazy weapon, and it's like, you can't be serious. And it's just so wonderfully surreal. Like, am I watching this? Is this real? Yeah. So, yeah, it was a delight, that movie.
Yeah.
The Criterion. Oh, my picks, yes. Is it?
Come on. No. You
should I do a pick?
Yep.
I don't have a movie, but I do have another escape into LA kind of pick. It's the Amazon Prime has all seasons of the Rockford Files, which I know we've all seen before, but it's a special treat now to go hang with Jim Rockford during this pandemic. I mean, watching a couple a night, and I had a great surreal shock when Jim, after being beat up, of course, and thrown in jail, as he always does every episode, he sprung and walks out of a very official-looking building. And I realized it's Burbank City Hall, like 2 blocks from where I live, where we walk our dog. It's like, wow. I mean, it's great seeing LA and like what hasn't changed and what has totally changed, The vibe has changed, the traffic's changed. I mean, all so much, but still there's some things there. It's like, wow, this is still Rockford's place. So to me, that's a great way of getting out of my own head, my own apartment into like, into that great, Pontiac Firebird with him and touring around LA. So that's just been guilty pleasure fun.
That's good. I wouldn't have thought. Lauren, are you watching anything?
Yeah. Although what Duane was saying about LA made me realize that I did not actually describe Your House Will Pay, which is kind of based on the it's a LA based super like, obviously she's an LA person because and it's the kind of thing. I'm a very New York person, so I kind of, until I moved to LA, I had no idea about LA. I'd spent like 48 hours in downtown, so I had like no conception of what LA was like. I just was a completely skewed perspective of it.
Yeah.
So that book is based on one of the triggering events of of 1991 sort of uprising after Rodney King was beaten in Letitia Harlan's. So it's like a fictionalized account of her murder and the fallout, and it's like also one of those great intersecting kind of books where people, it's just that reminder that we all share this geographical space, but our lives are very, very separate. And I love anything that makes me really understand, like really challenges our idea of a melting pot, because that's such like the New York narrative. We all know each other, we're all so close, we're all sharing space, but sometimes our lives are pretty separate. Sometimes you stay in the same orbit, but this book is reminding you of the moments in which we all do intersect. Me, after that long thing, Tiger King, that's what I've been watching, and it was a wild ride. I didn't watch the very last one. They came out with a new one, and I was like, no, I'm gonna leave this as is. It's perfect as it stands. I don't need any supplements.
You didn't see the reunion show?
Yeah. I didn't see it. I respect art. I'm not gonna, just let it be what it is. So I think that I'm just looking to escape, and that one too. During this pandemic, I'm definitely looking to escape, and that one.
Yeah.
Really, for 8 hours, I was absorbed in this world.
What your editor would say. I mean,
movies, TV. What are you doing? Watching?
Alison.
You.
Okay, so well, I have a lot of things that I've been watching, so in terms of TV shows, I just to go into that, I would say my big addictive TV shows during this period have been Ozark and Dare Me by yours truly over there, or hers truly. Have both been just so wonderfully absorbing to me and so satisfying, where and they're both so character driven. I think that's what has sort of been such a great escape for me. So, Ozark is this story of these people that you think you know, and then turns out you don't know them at all. And there's, tremendous, darkness to these characters that seem like, oh, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But no, they were there in that place to begin with. And it's up to you to find that out. Dare Me is similar in a way in that, we're talking about cheerleaders and female friendships and I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing Megan, right? But I found that with each episode I got to know and I read the book, but I still found that I got to know things about these characters that I never knew before, and these darknesses, but also incredible strength that within these characters, particularly the character of Beth, who sort of like comes across as maybe the villain in the first episode, and then you get to know her and you realize what a the bad hand she's been dealt, and how strong she really is. That it really, I found it very unexpectedly moving. I was absorbed in the story from the beginning, but I found all the character stuff very moving, and it ends on an insane cliffhanger. Damn it! But it's a great show. I can't recommend it enough. And same with Ozark, both very dark. If you don't like dark things, don't listen to me. But and then okay, so then the movie, as long as we're going to just go quickly blow through it, the movie might not seem as dark, but it's Some Like It Hot, and I watched that with my family, and my daughter saw it for the first time. My husband and I are already big fans of it, and it's a great crime movie. You might not realize that, think of it that way, but it's a terrific crime movie. There are some really scary scenes with these very serious mafia guys, and it's great because otherwise it would make no sense as to why these two guys dressed up as women and tried to join the all-girls band and fell in love. I mean, I'm not sure that's a draw, for anybody, but it's everything is earned. Every crazy, weird twist in that movie is earned, and it's a terrific crime story. I cannot recommend it enough. And also, best last line of any movie ever. I found out from these guys. So.
Carol Zanuck told Billy Wilder, you can't have a movie with criminals and violence and have it be a comedy. It'll fail.
Yeah.
So about the last line of the movie, that was a placeholder. They didn't have a last line. And then they just kept it.
Wow.
Wow. Everybody knows, of course, I think, that it was supposed to be Mitzi Gaynor, not Marilyn Monroe. And then Marilyn Monroe expressed interest, supposedly, and as Billy Wilder said, now we had everything, everything firing on all cylinders. And no, it's a brilliant, brilliant movie. So there's so many things to say about it. But I was thinking, I wanted to echo. Well, Some Like It Hot, I watched it twice during the pandemic because I think if anything feels good, you have to do it more than once. This is my so I watched Some Like It Hot twice.
Okay, then.
Monroe is just the most lovely creature, And then Criterion Channel, I watched all the Columbia Noir, and then they have a thing on the 70s. So I watched Clute. I watched What's Up, Doc, which is delightful. Made me laugh. That made me happy. Then I decided I had never seen Succession. How did I miss it? So I mean, I was screaming at the screen because I also had a really rough father, but not quite like that one. But that show's amazing. So many things.
Again, I think we're all one characters right now somehow. I guess it's down to scale in some ways and makes them more human.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to binging Dare Me. I
just want to tell you that Dare Me's pretty sexy, So if you're home alone, it's a little, I don't know. I mean, it sent me on my 80s quest so that I had to watch, what's that movie? Never mind. The Last Seduction, but that's not the one I'm thinking of.
Wasn't that what you were saying before? Didn't you say Basic Instinct?
Not Basic Instinct. No, it's the one, oh man, William Hurt and
Body Heat.
Body Heat.
Body Heat is so sexy. I had to like take a shower. I mean, it's so great. It's so
Very
great.
explicit. I have to say.
Watch it twice.
They don't make movies. What's that? Sorry, Duane?
Watch it twice.
Yeah, no, I couldn't do that to myself.
Two showers.
I'm gonna look at the questions and see if there are. I don't know. There's chat here.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing that they're too intense for me to binge. I needed the weekly break to catch my breath.
So here's So it says, questions to all panelists. What resources would you recommend for literary fiction writers moving into mystery crime writers in terms of good plotting? So in other words, they're asking a question about plotting, like what books or things would you suggest? I'll send that out to all of you. Books that are really plotted or...
Jeez.
Well, I mean, I just read Strangers on a Train, read the heck out of it, I think, and Highsmith, but also James M. Cain. I mean,
yeah.
As far as plot goes, just propulsive, and
Megan, I can't hear you. What do you?
It depends whether you want. I mean, a lot of the novels we've been talking about are not sort of classic mysteries. Which is a different kind of structure. So if you want to, write one of those, you should be reading Agatha Christie. You should be reading, But if what you want to read is some of the more character-based crime novels that we've been talking about, James F. Cain, Chandler, Highsmith, that are probably gonna just absorbing them. A lot of them really fail at all the plot rules.
That's true. Chandler fails all the time. Agatha Christie is a perfect plotter. I just read the story, Witness for the Prosecution. I thought it was a novel. Turns out to be a short story that spawned the play and the great, great movie.
Billy Wilder again.
Billy Wilder.
Yeah.
It's a great movie.
You could do a hell of a lot worse than learning story and plot from Billy Wilder.
Yeah.
That's true.
10 rules of writing are the best to me. Even
Well,
better than Elmer Leonard.
There's also the great Cameron Crowe interviewing Billy Wilder book.
which I bought for my husband for his birthday. So I did. And
it's like Hitchcock's Crow. And I would, those are great writer books, even though they're about film.
Yeah.
Actually, the how-tos, I'm sorry, Lauren, go ahead, Lauren, sorry. I'm not a big fan of how-to books in writing, but growing up, reading Lawrence Block's how-to books, like Write Your First Novel, like there's a few of them where it gave names to things I was seeing in stories. Like I didn't know what, character development meant until like Lawrence Block put a name on it. I kind of this is how pieces fit. It kind of gave me a language to like figure out, okay, here's how a novel works. You can pick it apart. They're very kind of, sort of nuts and bolts, not fancy, but very funny books. They're, as far as if you're really trying to figure out a genre, he's great at picking apart what makes his own books work, what makes other books work. That was a big help to me looking for that kind of training.
I would say read a Lawrence Block book,
Yeah, of course.
To the grave, whatever that one is, the Graveyard. He's a great plotter. He's a wonderful writer. He's very lean. He understands plot. He's terrific.
Yeah. So. And just so the question specifically, if you're a literary fiction writer moving into mystery crime writing, I sort of thought of myself as a literary fiction writer because that was what I was reading mostly. So I think to make that transition, I'm going to advocate open theft once more. Like whatever your story is, if you find a book that has a structure that really resonates with you, if you put the skin of your story on the bones of something else, it will be something else. And it will take you someplace. Maybe that's not going to be the first book that you publish, but it's certainly an excellent exercise. I really, you can steal things and they look like yours. It's amazing. So I really definitely, just as a form of practice, find that structure that you love and just put your, really put your flesh over those bones and see where you go.
It's a brilliant idea. And I think also to take a book, a crime novel, a crime fiction novel that you love, and kind of break it down, deconstruct it, see where's Act 1, where's the end of that plot point, where's the body of the Act 2, how do they make the denouement, how do they wrap it up? You can see it if it's, and then apply it to your own work in some way.
Yeah, I mean, Raymond Chandler famously took apart Earl Stanley Gardner stories, right? And kind of his pulp stories for that reason exactly. How do they work? How did you do that? How do you achieve that effect? That's great. You find a story you like and figure out, okay, how do they do this? What makes this? Why was I scared at this point? Why was I nervous? That's great advice.
Yeah, we were always saying like, you got to read in order to know how to write well, and this is why, right? Because like when you read, you're not just reading, you're just to do it, just for, you're reading to kind of unlock the structure of what you're looking at, and so then you can just do it. I think that's the best way to learn. Speaking as someone who went to graduate school, he threw away a lot of money doing that. That is definitely, very the way that you got to start reading, I think.
You guys,
how people are writing in the pandemic. I saw that question.
Yeah, let's start. Yeah.
What was that? Sorry.
How people are writing, if people are we were writing in the pandemic. Was a question.
Yeah.
I've been writing. It's been in kind of fits and bursts. I have a deadline looming. I've been, working as hard as I can. I do think I will probably have to look it over and rewrite when I'm in more of a, level place. But I do find that it's been very good in terms of unleashing certain things in my psyche. A lot of anger. That's good because I'm writing a very angry book, so that's good. But I feel like in my second draft I might have to dial it back a little bit. I'm not sure.
Dial it forward, please.
I want to ask that question of everyone. What are you writing? Are you writing? What are you writing? So Alison did that. Megan, are you working on something?
Yes, I turned in my novel.
Nice.
It was the only thing that could have gotten me to finish this book was apparently this quarantine. So I did that. Now I'm doing revisions. But I did have to do that old trick where you set your timer for 20 minutes and write for don't look at anything and just keep doing that all day. And it is so hard. And anyone who's struggling, I think people should be gentle with themselves, and your brain's doing stuff even if you're not getting words on the page or the words you would want, and you have to follow the rhythm. But I do think sort of stuff from unconscious stuff is going on now for all of us, and that's gonna feed its way into the books in interesting ways, and you just gotta let yourself be. It's the David Lynch thing that he says that ideas are like fish just swimming by, and you just have to be grab
right.
It's good. I love that. Lauren, you're working?
Well, like Alison, being on deadline is what is doing it for me. I've been working in a room, like in a spy room, but it's my last day is tomorrow. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see what kind of, I've been working just because I have to, because it's literally my job at the moment. So on Monday, when it's no longer my job, I'm curious to see if I'll be able to produce anything. I'd love to start a novel again. So, but we'll see. Yeah. We'll see what happens with that.
Duane, did you want to?
Well, it's funny. Lauren mentioned the deadlines. Yeah, I mean, life hasn't changed too much for me. I mean, I've been on constant deadlines of various things. Like I'm running a scripted podcast, working on pitches for things. I just turned in a draft of a movie screenplay, which is all great. I mean, it's all thankfully coronavirus proof right now until they, realize you can't make anything. But and for my own work, I'm working on a mystery novel that I quickly realized that I have to set it in the near past. It won't work in 2020. It already is dated to a certain year. It's oh boy, everything is because people actually have a meal in a restaurant. You can't do that. I mean, it's something simple as that. You have to really rethink and okay, this is a novel of this era. And now what comes after is kind of exciting and scary to think, what will novels be like, and in the crime field especially, what will that be like?
Yeah, that's
so. different.
Yeah. I'm like a lot of people. I'm working on edits on the novel I just sold. But I also, at the beginning of this, I decided to start a new novel, which has been really interesting. So, and I said it very far in the past, but which is really fun. But it's also, maybe it's from watching movies like Body Heat and The Last Seduction. It's the only novel I've ever written that feels close to, well, let me be polite, a love story. You know, it's actually kind of, I don't know, it might be softcore porn. We'll see when somebody else reads it. I don't know. But, you know.
Well,
Read it twice.
I'm reading
Read it twice.
Well, Megan always gets my books, and I get hers. So I can't wait. So, you know.
Great.
I think, are we finished? Are we at the end? We didn't get, it's 8:30. So I hope people enjoyed our talk, and I'm sorry if we didn't get to your questions or we didn't get to a lot of things, but we will maybe if you ask us back, you know, and thank you, Duane and Lauren and Megan and Alison, everybody. You know, we've suggested books, but if you've never read a Duane Swierczynski or Alison Gaylin or Megan Abbott or Lauren Wilkinson book, you have to get these people's books. These are all amazing writers.
And Jonathan Santlofer.
Absolutely.
All righty. So thank you, everyone, and stay safe and entertain yourself with books and movies and television. The Rockford Files. Oh my God.
Awesome.
Such a fantastic panel. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Melanie. Night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Night,
Good to see you
everyone.
guys.